Good morning, folks. Welcome to another devotional. Thanks to you for your prayers for last week. As you know, I was to go to Kenya on Wednesday and return on the Lord's Day. As it turned out, we didn't actually get to Kenya. And the reason for that was because we were meant to have a visa to get into Kenya, but we weren't told that we were meant to have this visa. So Robert McCacken and myself in Dublin Airport were asked at the check-in for our visa to Kenya, and because we didn't have it, they wouldn't let us board the flight. So God in his providence prevented us from going on that trip. I don't know why, and at the time it was very frustrating, but within a few hours, having returned back up to our house, we accepted that God in his wisdom knew, of course, what he was doing, and we just had to accept that. The other guys who were in Kenya with whom we were meant to be going did give us a video tour of the work, and God willing, we will be discussing that with our committee with a view to hopefully planning a team to go to Kenya in August. God's providences are strange at times, and it's not always easy to submit to those providences, but we have to accept them knowing God knows best. Now, coming back to our daily devotional, we were beginning to look at Psalm 47, and we looked at verses 1 and 2 in our previous study. Today we're going to look at verses 3 and 4. Verses 1 and 2 deal with a recent event, the overthrow of the Assyrian army that was attacking Jerusalem. In verses 3 and 4, the psalmist then turns his thoughts not to something that has happened in the immediate present, but something that's happened in the distant past. Let me read those words, verses 3 and 4 to you. He subdued peoples under us and nations under our feet. He chose our inheritance for us, the pride of Jacob, whom he loves. In verses 3 and 4, the psalmist is looking back on how God had been there for and had worked on behalf of his people in the past. The specific events to which he is referring is the going into and the taking possession of the land of Canaan. Now, whenever Israel came to the borders of Canaan, they faced what for them was the overwhelming, indeed seemingly impossible task of defeating, of overthrowing and subduing the nations that at that time possessed the land of Canaan. Nations that were strong, warlike people. The Hittites, the Amorites, the Ammonites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, and so on. These were strong people who lived in well-fortified cities. Cities like, for example, Jericho. Israel were not a war-trained people. They had just come out of slavery. How were they going to overthrow and overcome their enemies and take possession of the land? Well, it would not be in their own strength, but it would be by the mighty power of God. And sure enough, as they gave themselves to the project that God had called them to the work of taking possession of that which God had promised to them, God exercised his mighty power on their behalf. And one by one, the cities fell. One by one, the peoples who occupied the land were subdued. Verse 3 of Psalm 47, he subdued peoples under us, nations under our feet. Humanly speaking, what they were undertaking seemed impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Remember the words of Abraham Is anything, or the words that were spoken to Abraham, I should say, is anything too hard for the Lord? The reason God did this for them was because God had chosen this land for them to possess. He had promised it to them. This was their inheritance. Look at verse 4. He chose our inheritance for us, the pride of Jacob, whom he loved. God worked on their behalf and became to them everything they needed because he loved them. The pride of Jacob, whom he loved. And the psalmist who is writing this psalm, in the light of God's most recent deliverance of his people from the Assyrians, then looks back to and reminds himself and the people who will be reading this psalm, reminds them of the fact that this is how it's always been with God. God has always been there for his people. And in his love for them, he comes to them and he helps them in their times of need. When they are weak, he demonstrates his mighty power. The memory of God's past dealings with them gives them comfort for the present and hope for the future. That's what these two verses are all about. Just as God has delivered us from the Assyrians just recently, well, that's what he's always done. He did it in the past. And therefore, we can have comfort knowing that God will do it for us in the future. And that's how it is with us, brethren. It's good to reflect and remember God's dealings with us in the past. Times when we faced challenges, times when things were difficult, times when we didn't know how we were going to move forward. And God came and God acted for us and took us forward. And the God who was with us then is the God who is with us now and the God who will be with us in the future. You see, just like the children of Israel, all of us face challenges in life, and we have seen God bringing us through challenges and difficulties and hardships. And those challenges differ as we go on in life. And so when we face challenges, when we face changes, when we face concerns, let us do what the psalmist did and recall God's dealings with us in the past and take comfort with regards to that for the future. There are changes coming in our lives. Time brings changes. And even in my own circumstances, changes are coming. And in my two congregations, changes are coming within the next number of months. But the wonderful thing is that whilst our circumstances change and we face challenges, our God never changes. And he's the God who can overcome our challenges for us on our behalf. The psalmist says of his God, he subdued peoples under us and nations under our feet. He chose our inheritance for us, the pride of Jacob, whom he loves. And God has his plans for us. And as we give ourselves to the work to which he's called us, God will be there for us. And he will indeed bring us through. May God bless you throughout this day and in the rest of the week that lies ahead. God willing, we'll speak again on Wednesday.